Hey guys, this is Stephanie and I'm Stacks on Stacks on Stacks. Today I'm coming to you with my July and August wrap up because I didn't do one in July. I was on vacation, I was in the midst of booktubeathon, so it just didn't happen. So I'm going to do it now, and I'm going to keep most of these reviews pretty brief. I read 8 books in July and I read 13 books in August, so I'm going to do them both now together and keep them brief. I'm also going to do them in order of least liked to most liked, so I can end on a high note. But first, I'm going to be talking about the Drinking by Your Shelf challenge, Get a Hold of Your Shelf, which is challenging me to read books on my TBR shelf. I should probably pull 2 of these from the mug every month because I think I add more books than I take off, but whatever. The July one was to read a book that takes place in a foreign city, and I did that. It was Us Against You by Friedrich Backman. And the August one was to read a book with a male protagonist. Whoop. Scott Pilgrim versus the World. I read all 6. They were pretty fun. And let's see. The September one will be, ooh, I got 2. Okay. Read a book with blue on it off of your TBR. I think I'm gonna go with The Librarian of Auschwitz, which is by Antonio Iturbi. And this is one I'm actually planning on starting next week, which is why it's an easy one for me to pick. It has blue all over it. I don't really know specifically what it's about, but I think it's about a girl who makes a library in Auschwitz. It's gonna be my guess. I'm sure it'll be great. Okay, so the worst book that I read in the last 2 months would have to be Jane Eyre by Charlotte Bronte. This book, okay, I could have sworn that I'd read it. I'm pretty sure in high school I read the Cliff's Notes. I didn't actually read the book, and I now remember why I didn't read the book. This was painful. I gave this book a 1.8 personally and a 2.5 technically. I feel like my 2.5 was very generous, and it was basically because this is a classic. I was not enjoying this book. It was slow. It was wordy. I feel like nothing happened for pages and pages on end. Basically, in this book, we're following a girl named Jane Eyre, who is an orphan, and she's been wronged and people are crappy to her. And then in her adult years, she becomes a governess in this big manor for this girl who speaks French and English. And she kind of falls in love with the master of the house. Now, I gotta be honest with you, this just fell flat in so many ways, and I don't quite understand why it's so acclaimed. I mean, I guess you're like, oh, it's a classic, and their writing back then was different than it is now. Things like that I can kind of respect, but at the same time, I'm like, dude, she was a doormat to every person she encountered, and Mr. Rochester is a douche canoe. I think he's bipolar, because literally on one page, he'd be like, Jane, you're the most wonderful thing in the world, and I just being around you brings life to me. And the next page, he's like, but those girls in there, they're sure hot, aren't they? And I'm like, dude, you're a jerkwad. Why do girls like guys that are mean to them? I don't understand. I don't get it, and I don't like it, and I'm like, this is dumb. It was frustrating, and I mean, there might be some spoils in here. At one point, Jane runs away, and then when she runs away, it's still really slow, and things don't really happen. And then when she comes back, it's like, oh, everything's okay. All those things that are a problem, they're not a problem now. And I'm like, they kind of are. Like, he lied to you. So what else is he gonna lie to you about? Also, running away doesn't solve problems. I had many issues with this book. In addition to which, I feel like I could probably summarize each page with 1 sentence, and I can make this book considerably smaller. I don't think you need to read the whole book to get the gist of it. Now, I read the whole book because I wanted to read My Plain Jane, which I got in an Owl Crate a few months ago, and I couldn't read it until I read this. But now I can read it. Job is done. It's over. And as a side note, I was reading, and I wrote this down because I thought it was clever on my part, a scene where Mr. Rochester is like almost toying with her. He's like, oh, and he was like grabbed her hair or something. And then the next like paragraph down, he was just like, but I don't know if I even like girls like you. You're simple and plain. And he would call her Janet, and her name is Jane. And I'm like, dude, that's not her name. Her name's not Janet, it's Jane. It'd be like people calling me Steven instead of Stephanie. And I'd be like, dude, that's not my name, and I'm not gonna respond to it. There's just so much that could have benefited from this book if she would have just, slapped some people around. I think everything would have been better if there were just a little more physical fighting in this book. I probably would have enjoyed it more. But I kept thinking that Rochester is kind of like those boys in elementary school that pull on girls' hair and throw food at them and stuff like that because they like them. I feel like he communicates like a Neanderthal. Just not a book I liked. It's not a book I liked, and I don't want to talk about it a whole bunch more. maybe another time. Next lowest rating on the book I have is The Summer I Turned Pretty by Jenny Han. You really can't see the cover very well, which is okay because it's an ugly cover. I gave this a 2.5 personally and 2.5 technically. It's a pretty basic YA contemporary. I actually picked it up because I finished The Book of M, which is a pretty intense book, and I needed something quick and light and fluffy. And I was like, oh, I'll just go to my contemporary shelf, and I've been meaning to read this for years. And it did fall kind of flat for me, I'm not gonna lie. Like, it was pretty typical YA. It's summer vacation and she goes to the beach house that she always goes to. And of course she likes the bad boy and they've known each other their whole lives and she tries to make him jealous and then he does it. And she does a lot of stupid and irritating things. She does a lot of like, I don't know, childish things, but she's only 15, so that's probably part of it. I just found our main character, whose name is Belly, which was weird, vapid and shallow, and I didn't really like her. And so when she wasn't getting her way, I was like, you deserve a spanking, kid. Again, a book that needs more violence. Do you guys see a trend here? I didn't hate it so much that I wouldn't finish the series though. Like, I might continue on the series because there were some things that were interesting. I did tear up towards the end, which I'm sure was the intention. So, I mean, it wasn't a terrible, awful book. I gave it a 2.5 because for me, it's like straight down the middle road. I don't know if I'd read it again, probably not, but I am curious to know what's going to happen in the next 2 books. If the next book sucks, I'm not going to finish the series. I think it's because I was watching To All the Boys I Loved Before. I actually watched it once and then I started to watch it a second time because I thought the first time was so cute. And I actually think I might like the movie more than I liked the book. Like, I liked the book, okay, not enough to keep the series, but I liked the movie. I thought it was really sweet, and I think that's another reason I was like, ooh, a good contemporary, which... no, it just didn't quite hit the same spot. Maybe I need to stick to Morgan Matson. I tend to like hers. Next one I ranked a 2.5 personally and a 2.0 technically is Us Against Them by Friedrich Backman. This is the sequel to Beartown, which I wasn't crazy about Beartown, but I did feel like it dealt with an issue that doesn't get talked about a lot, and that's good. But this one picks up where the other one leaves off, but it didn't make any sense because the other one wraps up everything and they're like, okay, so this character does this, and in 10 years she's here. And this character does this, and in 10 years he's here. And then they have the sequel, and you get to see them take that first step, and then in 10 years they go, like, nothing changes. Nothing happened in this book that I didn't know about. Everything that they said was going to happen at the end of the last one happened. I mean, it was just empty and useless, and I didn't see the point of this book at all. And I didn't enjoy it either. I still don't like the changing tenses. I didn't love the story. I was just like, yeah, it was a bit of a waste of time. I feel like I would read a book by this author again, but at the same time, not a book in this series. I feel like everything that needs to be said has been said, and this was to make an extra $1, I'm sure, because nothing happened. The next book I have is called Flight, and this is by Sherman Alexie. Now, this is a book that a friend of mine in real life said that he liked and he read in like middle school, and he's like, you should read it and see why I liked it. Now, I actually gave this book a 3.5 personally and a 3.0 technically. Basically, in this book, we are following a kid who is in the foster system and life is unfair, and he is kind of a chip on his shoulder against the world. And then he kind of gets pulled through time and starts to see the world through other people's perspectives. And in doing so, it changes a very bad decision that he was going to make. So I guess I spoiled the book for you. It was a fine book. It was definitely like a middle grade level reading book. I don't think I was particularly in the mood for a middle grade level reading book at the time, but I did like the fact that it pulls him out of his time. He's put in somebody else's body. He's experiencing their emotions and seeing the world through their eyes. And it was very eye-opening for him. And I'm sure a middle school kid would love this book. I just said it was fine. A 3.5 isn't bad. It's just not one I'd read again. And I did like the plot, but it did take a while to get going as well. The next book I read was Crazy Rich Asians by Kevin Kwan. I gave this a 3.6 personally and a 3.6 technically. I straight up read this book because I wanted to go see the movie. Now, I will let you know that I thought the book was better than the movie. It usually is, but in this case it definitely was. The book, you really get to know your main character really well, Rachel, and I really liked her as the main character. Like, I don't know if I'll continue on with this series. Like, the way they ended it, I was okay with that ending. I don't know if I need to read 2 more books about it, but I did enjoy her as a character, and I liked our hero as well. I thought he was great. He was likable, like, it was a believable character. The things I didn't like about this was I didn't care for, like, yes, I know they're crazy rich and they buy hotels on a whim and they can go shop in Paris every month and do these things. Like, I get that, but it did get old. It got old real fast, this excessive lifestyle, and I was just like, man, I know what I would do with that money, and none of it has to do with buying cars, clothes, or a hotel. But maybe I'm just being too sensible about the whole thing. I kind of thought it was going to be a bit of a chick lit book, and it kind of was, but it did have more substance to it than I thought it would, and I liked that. I don't feel like the movie added the substance. I think that's the thing I didn't like about the movie. It changed some stuff around, but I feel like the book gave it some definite substance, and I feel like the movie left it at chick lit, which it had a step up of chick lit, so why not leave that in? I don't know. But the book did surprise me a little bit, so that's always good. Next book I have is Crank by Ellen Hopkins, and this is actually a book that my niece loaned me. She's like 20 something, and she loaned this to me, and it follows a girl who gets addicted to, I think, meth. And then she's like a teenage girl, like 16-year-old girl. She gets addicted to meth because her father does meth. And then when she goes back to her mom in that house, she's addicted. And it's all like in her head of how she's viewing things. And now she's sleeping around to get drugs and all sorts of things. And it basically, like, you watch that ramp up of addiction. And I mean, it was depressing, don't get me wrong. But it's definitely a story that isn't told often. And it might have helped me with a little bit of perspective on addiction. I did give this a 3.8 personally, and a 4.0 technically. I actually thought the writing was quite good. It was kind of beautiful. I'm not sure if I'll continue on in the book, but again, the writing was quite beautiful. I'm trying to show you, like, it's almost poetic the way it's written. Here we go. Like, it has like a group of words here and then individual words there. So you can read the individual words, and that's like part of a poem, and then you could read it by lines, and it's telling you the story. So it'll say humiliation somewhere beneath the monster's bravado, and that's like reading them down, and it kind of changes the meaning of it. It was very clever, and it was very well written, and like I said, it was beautiful writing, but it left me so sad. Just sad that people struggle with this, that this is real, this is an addiction, that people raise children in this environment, and the addiction is so strong, they don't actually see it as a negative. They are still willing to like keep their child, because I'm a good parent, yet you're exposing your child to this, and it definitely has perspective in it, but at the same time, it was so sad. I don't know if I can read that, and it was also based on a true story, so the details aren't 100% accurate, but it's mostly true, and that also makes me sad. Next, I'm going to talk about Reaper at the Gates by Saba Tahir. Now, I gave this book a 4.0 personally and a 4.0 technically, and I think some of the lower rating comes from the fact that I thought this was the conclusion to the series, not the third book in a series. I thought this was it. So I was reading it, and I was just like, really? Really? And then I found out, like, after I read it, like, I thought that was the conclusion. They're just leaving things like that. And I was like, well, that kind of sucks, but there will be more. Which is good, because I wasn't pleased with the ending, and that made me feel a little bit better. So looking back at this as a book in a series, I think I liked it a little more. There was a lot of action, and I do like action in books. I like the way Saba Tahir writes her action as well. I like the way she writes her characters. I liked the path she took most of our characters down, and like the twists that she weaved in and out were great as well. At times there was so much happening that I was having a hard time tracking things, like not just the perspective jumps, but like this is happening with this character, and then this one whose name is kind of similar, and then every once in a while a character just pops up and they do this thing, and I actually went back and I'm like, did I miss something? Are they an already known character? And then I thought maybe they're from a past book and I just forgot about them. No, they just kind of pop up and they're like, you should know me, and I'm like, but why would I know you? So I had some confusion with this book. The writing confused me a little because I feel like it was action, 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 new character, action, action, and it was just like, wait, who did it? What happened here? So a slight markdown for that, but it's still a series I love. It's still a book I'll probably buy, and it's a series I'll definitely continue to read. Next, I have the 6 Scott Pilgrim graphic novels. Scott Pilgrim, Precious Little Life, Scott Pilgrim vs. the World, Scott Pilgrim and the Infinite Sadness, Scott Pilgrim Gets It Together, Scott Pilgrim vs. the Universe, and then Scott Pilgrim's Finest Hour. These are really fun books. I read these for the booktubeathon, and then I watched the movie that went with it. Of course, the books are better than the movie, but the movie's still pretty great. This is some of the artwork in it. That's kind of the style. It's really fun. It's about a guy named Scott Pilgrim who's a little less than motivated, and he's kind of a loser with a band, doesn't really keep a job, and is dating a high school girl. And his progression through that and other things, and it has a slight, I don't know what you could say, supernatural, unrealistic element to it, where he can like, I can punch somebody so hard they die kind of thing. Probably what a middle school boy thinks in his head, but still I really like these. I gave them a 4.0 personally and a 4.2 technically. I feel like it was just kind of a fun ride, a silly ride. It has lots of video game references, which I thought were hilarious and fun. And I did enjoy these. I will read these again. I'll probably read other things by Brian Lee O'Malley because super enjoyed. The next book I have for you is Passenger by Alexander Bracken. I gave this book a 4.0 personally and a 4.0 technically, and this is another book that I read for the Booktubeathon. In this book, we are following a girl who is a concert violinist. She's like 17, I think, and basically she's going to like a big concert. She's going to perform and be amazing, and gets pulled back into a loop of time and finds out that she's actually a time traveler, something she inherited from her mother, who's also a time traveler, and they are holding her mother ransom, and she has to go travel through time and find a thing and give it back to the people so she can get her mother back. So that aspect of the book I really did like. I liked the time travel aspect. I thought it was fun. I liked a lot of our supporting characters. Our heroine, she was pretty good, but I didn't like the hero, the love interest. There was way too much insta love in here for me, for starters, and he just wasn't like attractive enough. Like there weren't enough attractive qualities about him for me to be like, yeah, she'd go for that guy. I was like, no, she won't. I also found it very, very predictable. The plot was predictable. What the characters were going to do next was predictable. The fact that the two love interests hook up was super predictable. And maybe that's because it's YA, I'm not sure. I feel like I gave it the higher rating I gave it because I enjoyed the time travel aspect. I enjoyed kind of the history aspect of that as well. And they didn't break the time travel thing or any of their rules yet, but I feel like they were so close to breaking some of them. It made me a little bit nervous, but they didn't break them, and I did read it. I read it pretty quickly, and I actually got the next book because I want to read it. The next one I read was A Long Way to a Small Angry Planet by Becky Chambers. I gave this book a 4.0 personally and a 3.8 technically. I liked this book. For me, it was kind of a mix between like Firefly and Star Trek. It takes place in outer space, and you have characters that are aliens and characters that are human commingling. It's not weird, it's everyday kind of stuff, and I did like that. And they're all on a ship, hence kind of the Firefly aspect. We have, you know, our engineer who's kind of a Kaylee, and we have our captain who's pretty cool dude, and it's not exactly the same, not at all, but it is similar. And I think that's one of the reasons I did kind of like it. This is a very character-driven book. Most of the time, I think I prefer character-driven books, but you have to have a plot. I didn't feel like this book had much of a plot. I feel like it had a few mini plots. Like I feel like it was like, here's your cast of characters, and then it was like 6 little short stories, 6 little plots. The overarching plot was pretty weak in my opinion. So I didn't like that aspect of it, but I really did like the characters. I really found them interesting and relatable and fun. I wanted to know what was going on. I cared about them. But this is going to be a classic example of a lot of character and not a lot of plot. I was surprised that I liked it as much as I did, saying there was little plot, but I really did like it. I will continue on the series, though it's been explained to me that we are dealing with characters that were briefly mentioned in this book, and that's what the next book is, and then that's what the third book is. So I don't think in going forward I'm going to get this cast of characters again, which is too bad because I do like them. I'm attached to them. This is a book I don't own, but I will definitely be buying at some point because I will definitely reread it. The next book I read was Full Moon by Jim Butcher. This is a reread for me. This is the second book in the Dresden Files series. Dresden Files is following a wizard named Harry who lives in modern day Chicago. So he has like an advertisement in the Yellow Page that says, I'm a wizard, I don't do tricks, I don't do parties, I help you find lost things. This is a series I super enjoy, and I'm trying to make my way through it by the end of the year. There's 15 books in the series, or 16 now, and I don't think I'm going to get all 16 read by the end of the year. This is the second one. I read the first one in June, but I want to try and do 2 a month for a few months and see if I can do that, because I forgot how much I like the series. I forgot how much I love the characters and the world building and the fact that he pulls characters from one book to the next, and then the next, and then the next, and then you don't see them, and then they're in the next, and it's just good writing. It's just good writing. I did give this a 4.2 technically and a 4.2 personally. Next we have Book of M by Peng Shepherd. Now this is one that Kat over at Brews and Reviews was just raving about for weeks. And then they got it on audiobook, so I listened to the audiobook. It was a pretty good audiobook. I did give this a 4.5 technically and a 4.5 personally. Now I went into this book knowing nothing. I think I liked it better because I knew nothing. But bare bones, basically people in the world start losing their shadows, and when they lose their shadows, they also start losing their memories. And we were following a couple named Ori and Max who are married, and basically their journey through this post-apocalyptic world. I think this was just shy of 5 stars because of how it ended. I had a lot of questions at the end. I think there were things that were like, you just have to take this on faith. And I was like, I can't do that. I need answers. Like, I need to know why this happened and why that happened. And there were just too many questions. Now, maybe I read it too quickly and the questions were answered, but I don't think they were. I think that's just how the author wrote it. He wanted you to have questions, and I wanted more answers. So that's why it's a 4.5, not a 5 star. It's a very good book. It's very fast paced. It has multiple perspectives, but I followed perspectives just fine. As a matter of fact, every time I'd be really into it, and then we'd leave that perspective and go to another one, and I'd be like, but I was listening to, oh yeah, this one's really good too. And though it went back and forth between these perspectives, I didn't care. I loved it. I followed it. I enjoyed it. I couldn't read it fast enough. I think I read it in 3 days, or listened to it in 3 days, and it was like a 20-hour book. So I was really just booking it because I was really enjoying it. It has great characters. It has a very solid plot. And there were a few things that were a tiny bit predictable, like things I called him like, oh, well, if he's a good writer, he'll do this. And then he did. So maybe that means he's a good writer. He is a good writer. Or maybe it means I'm just good at guessing books. Who knows? The next book I read is The Girl with All the Gifts by M.R. Carey, and I actually read this one in July. This is a book that was recommended by Game of Tomes, and they actually told me nothing about it. Again, a great way to go into a book, and I didn't know anything. They wouldn't even tell me the genre, and I was like, oh, okay. Now, I will tell you this was a sci-fi genre is how I would have qualified it. I'm telling you that because there is the Tome Infinity and Beyond readathon where you're supposed to be reading sci-fi books. So if you're looking for a sci-fi book, that is the one to read. I think it's definitely a sci-fi book. I give this a 4.5, technically and a 4.5 personally. This book, we're following a young girl named Melanie, and there are a lot of questions surrounding things, so I'm really going to be vague, but basically she's in a school of sorts where they strap them to wheelchairs and they wheel them in, and they don't touch them and they don't interact with them physically at all, these kids, and they refer to them as special kids, but that's all you really know. And you're following Melanie's perspective. I like the fact we are following a child's perspective. Now, she's a very smart child, so she's able to process things intellectually, but it's still from a child's point of view, and I definitely like that. After I finished this book as well, I was thinking about it for days, just like I was with Book of M, thinking about it for days. I was thinking about this one for days, and it was just like, what happened exactly? Because the ending is a little abrupt, but more so the action in it, and even when there's not action, things are happening and the plot is most definitely progressing, and our characters are doing things. I was not bored, not for a second, and I was guessing the whole time, and I did not guess the end. I thought the end would be different than it was, and it took me a couple of days to be like, do I like that or not like that? So it's just a book I feel like that makes you think a little bit. Now, maybe you found it predictable. Maybe you're like, I knew it was going on the whole time. Well, congrats, you're smarter than me. I had no idea, and I definitely enjoyed that ride of not knowing. And I had 3 5-star books that I read in the last 2 months. First one is We Should All Be Feminists by Chimananda Ngozi Adichie. I really don't think I said that correctly. And I actually listened to this one on an audiobook. I got it while I was in New York City. My sister and I were talking about feminists, and I was like, I want to read that book. And it was available, so I did. I gave it a 5 stars personally and a 5-star technically. I thought it was great. It's actually an essay, I think, not a book. Like, it wasn't even an hour listening to it. I think it's a really tiny book. Basically, she talks about feminism and what it really is. And she also talks about what it's not, and how the view of what we say is feminism isn't actually what feminism is. A lot of times it's viewed as women who are angry, or women who hate men, or women who are lesbians. And that is not what it is. It's a woman who wants to be treated equally to a man. And that's about it. And I'm like, I like that. I like her view. I like the way she phrases things. I like her perspective. I feel like she has a light way of talking about a somewhat heavy topic. And I think she's a genius. I will read more things by her. I thought it was great. And it was definitely a very accurate picture of what feminism is. And I think that's why I really did appreciate it. So I can't talk about it much more. I guess I'd spoil it. There are no spoilers, but it was a nonfiction book and I did read it. I also gave 5 stars to Amy and Roger's Epic Detour by Morgan Matson. I loved this book. This was actually a buddy read with Serenity Dawn. I read it for the Booktubeathon, and I super loved this book. It was fun, it was clever. Now, don't get me wrong, it was predictable as well, but it was like YA contemporary kind of predictable, like, you know they're gonna get together, right? and that kind of thing. But they're literally on a journey, on a road trip from California to Connecticut together. They don't know each other. Like, they know the other one's not going to kill them in their sleep, but they're not like buddies or anything like that. So it's a matter of them getting to know each other and sharing things with each other and opening up about things. They both have some pretty heavy baggage they discuss as well, which I appreciated. And I kind of wonder if Morgan Matson lost a parent at some point, because quite a few of her characters in the books I have read have had to process losing a parent at one point. And that's a hard thing to write about if you haven't experienced it. So I wonder. I had really good discussions with Serenity Dawn about this too, about predicting what's going on, what they're going to do, and how things are going to go. And I enjoyed that. I'm doing another buddy read with her right now for Save the Date by Morgan Matson. She finished it on time and I did not. So hopefully I'll have that for you guys at the end of September. Now, I did give it a 5 stars personally because I enjoyed it, but I only gave it a 4.5 technically, and that is because I felt like the ending was very abrupt and there was a lot that wasn't settled, like a lot. So I felt like it was kind of like there should have been one more chapter. And it wasn't even that everything has to be tied up in a nice, neat bow, but there was just so many things that were just open. I mean, maybe she's going to do a sequel. Maybe we'll call it Amy and Roger's Bogus Journey or something like that. That could be fun. And I would definitely read that. So I definitely enjoyed the book. I would have to say the ending was a little for me, but not enough that I wouldn't read it again and enjoy it again. I think it's great. And the last book I read this month, which was 5 stars personally and 5 stars technically, is Morning Star by Pierce Brown. I finished it, you guys. I finished a series. I feel like there's so many series I don't finish. This book was incredible. The first book, I didn't love the main character the whole time. I was kind of like, he's kind of a jerk. And then the second book, I'm like, he still has pretty big jerk-like tendencies. And then in this book, he wised up. He matured. That's how I should put it. He matured. And this, I can't talk about. It's the 3rd book in the series. But I am going to say that this might have the most satisfying ending to a series that I have ever read. Like, even better than Well of Ascension, which is a hard thing to say because Well of Ascension's ending was very satisfying. But this ending was very satisfying. So it's hard to say. I can't really compare them apples and oranges, but I loved it. And I can't tell you how many people are like, oh my goodness, hurry up and read it already. And I was kind of dragging my feet. I kind of want to read it again. And that is it. Those are the 21 books I read over the last 2 months. Hopefully this isn't too heinously long because I'm trying to keep it short. If you've read any of these books, by all means, let me know. Let me know what you thought about them. Let me know if you liked them or didn't like them, because I want to know. Let me know what the best book you read in August was, because I always like to know the good books you guys are reading. Don't forget to like and don't forget to subscribe. You can find me here on Tuesdays and Fridays with new videos, so I look forward to seeing you guys then, and have a great month. Bye-bye.